Hello and welcome. Today I'm sharing with you some thoughts I have about some games that will, I'd say, never come to the Evercade. Now when it comes to licensing and things that could come, Blades themselves tend to say never. But in some cases I think never might be appropriate. Naturally, you never know how the landscape might change or how certain publishers and companies might change their view on such things. But some things, they're just really a complete long shot, and long shots is probably being generous. One obvious company that's always going to be a hard no is going to be Nintendo. They don't put their games on other systems for the most part, well, for 99% of the time, and why would they? So yeah, anything Nintendo, just no, not going to happen, never. And I think never is 100% appropriate with Nintendo. But I don't think anyone really expects anything else. Then of course you also have games which just aren't going to run on the Evercade hardware. So you can pretty much say never to anything that is PS2, GameCube, original Xbox and beyond. And you can pretty much say the same for Dreamcast games. And due to difficulties in emulation, the Atari Jaguar and Sega Saturn also fall into this category. Although with those, maybe with a breakthrough of in emulation or some improvement in the emulation overall, or some custom work, maybe they would be more viable. But that's not really the angle I'm taking with this video. This is more for things like Nintendo. For specific games or franchises that, due to licensing issues or who owns them, will never come to the Evercade. And I'm going to start this proper with anything owned by Sony. They don't tend to like to share, and you really don't see any of their stuff out there to any great degree, outside of their own consoles that is. And this means that a Psygnosis collection is never going to happen, which is a shame because I think this is one of the potential Amiga collections that people would most like to see. Sadly, it's also not just the Amiga stuff, as Psygnosis did a lot of PlayStation 1 games, some of my favourites in fact. Although some of the games that Psygnosis published were done by Reflections, who are owned elsewhere. But I think the PlayStation 1 games they did are under the Sony banner. I believe, I'm not 100% sure. But I do think it means we're not going to see things like Colony Wars, Wipeout, Destruction Derby, G-Police and whatever else. Roscoe McQueen. Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to see those on the Evercade. Nor are we going to see Shadow of the Beast, The Misadventures of Flink, Microcosm, Agony, The Adventures of Lomax, the Lemming series and many others. Something that also ties into this, as they were published by Psygnosis, are the Discworld games. Now I'm not entirely sure where the rights are in their entirety. They might still be with Psygnosis to some degree, but the developers became insolvent and where the rights went is a bit unclear. They might have reverted back to their Pratchett estate. There is a rumour that they became owned by the British government or the British royal family, but whatever it is, they are largely assumed lost, and there's a reason the games aren't on things like Good Old Games or anywhere really. So yeah, they're never coming to Evercade. So yeah, there's another big old barrier for them to cross. So the Discworld games, never going to happen either. Naturally, anything with multiple licenses required is going to be more problematic and less likely. So any form of licensed game, unless they happen to be owned solely by the owners of the IP the game was based upon, is probably unlikely. So GoldenEye, almost certain never to happen. But things owned by Disney potentially could, but I expect Disney are big bucks, so probably not. But this video is not about probably not, it's about never. Another game I've seen people ask for, and is one I was curious about myself, is Heart of Darkness for the PlayStation 1. A cinematic platformer by the creator of Another World that was published by Infogrames in the PAL regions and Interplay in North America. So you might think it potentially could happen. But sadly it's in legal rights limbo hell. Somewhere along the line of its development and multiple publishers being involved, it's a complete mess and no one's been able to untangle it. And I'm sure I read in an interview with Eric Chahi, the developer or lead designer rather, that he believes that it's complete and utterly stuck in rights limbo, and no matter how much he wants to, he's never going to be able to see it re-released. On a related note, the sequel to Another World, Heart of the Alien, will also never see any form of a re-release, but this time due to Eric Chahi absolutely hating it, or hating that it exists and never wanting to see it re-released. An unrelated title which I think will never see a release on the Evercade, or possibly never even a re-release at all, are the various Micro Machines games by Codemasters. Because while Codemasters, which is now owned by EA, own the code, they don't own the brand. And EA games on Evercade already seems unlikely. You throw in an additional license and yeah, that's not going to happen. Uni Racers or Uni Rally for the Super Nintendo will likely never see the light of day again in any shape or form, as the game was pulled from sale after a lawsuit from Pixar Animation over the main sprites and the animation. Psycho Fox for the Sega Master System is another game that's pretty much guaranteed to never come to the Evercade, or perhaps even see any kind of re-release. The same applies to pretty much all of Vic Tokai's catalogue. As while Vic Tokai still exist, apparently as a telecommunications company, they no longer have a gaming division, they've never licensed their old games, or acknowledge that they own the rights. And apparently no one's even sure if the original contracts even survive or whatever. Apparently it's just a complete mess and the games are essentially dead in a legal commercial sense. Okay, I think that's enough for one video, and it's probably not worth doing another one with other games unless something specific comes up, as there are many games which suffer the same issues. Rights can be a bit of a nightmare, whether they are down to companies having become insolvent and no one really keeping track of who owns what, or various licensing, be it from voice actors or music or what have you. And it tends to be less of an issue with games that were very successful. The companies keep them as a commercial interest to make sure things are legal and up to date. But the more obscure and the failed games, well, no one really cared enough, or at least no one who had the power to do anything about it. Anyway, I think I've gone on about this topic long enough. I hope you found it mildly interesting, and thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.